A new report suggesting that the investigations carried out by government into trade tariffs are taking too long, as a result, costing our economy billions of rand. So, normally, for example, if a chicken producer wants government to impose duties on imported chicken pieces, they would have to go to the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and ask for a tariff to be imposed. The people who import the chicken get a chance to respond, and within 6 months there's supposed to be a decision. Instead, this new report suggests most decisions are taking nearly 2 years. A huge amount of time. It's been compiled by Donald Mackay, the CEO of XA Global Trade Advisors. Donald, good afternoon to you. Okay, we know roughly how the process is supposed to work. It's supposed to take 6 months. Why are these investigations taking so long?
Well, partly, I'm not entirely sure, but we think a significant part of the reason is these reciprocal agreements which government is asking companies to sign. So this is a commitment that you need to sign off on and which you're legally bound to, for example, create a certain number of jobs or invest a certain amount in expanding your plant and so on. And I would guess that some of these agreements have fairly onerous requirements, and there's at least a certain group of companies who are probably not enthusiastic about signing off. I think that would be a big part of it.
Is there something wrong with the way the process is structured? Or, Donald, I mean, look, trade policy can be very difficult, can actually be very difficult to know what the consequences would be. Could some people not want to actually make decisions, so they just delay it?
Yeah, it could be that. And I think there probably is an element of that in there. But I think there's also a problem in that there's no legal requirement to ever complete these investigations. So although there's a requirement, if there's a prima facie case, to initiate a case, there isn't a legal requirement to complete it, let alone within a given time frame. And so investigations, you mentioned close to 2 years, but we have investigations that are close to 4 years outstanding, and with no indication of what the holdup is.
In some cases, I understand from your report, it's not actually certain who makes the decision, whether the final word belongs to the Minister of Finance or the final word, so that would be Enoch Godongwana, or the final word goes to the Minister of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, Ephraim Patel. I mean, that's amazing.
That isn't truly an astonishing fact, but there was two court cases in 2016 where the Minister of Finance, at that point, Malusi Gigaba, argued and convinced the court 2 out of 2 times that it was the Minister of Finance who makes the final decision. And so now we have this very confusing position where we're not actually sure if that's a rubber stamping role, although at that point the Minister of Finance said it absolutely isn't, or if it's something more substantive. So that's certainly not helping the process.
Is the process transparent? And this is really important. I mean, we're talking about trade policy here. This is not about raising money really through the fiscus. It's not really about raising money through tax. But it does distort the economy, and it protects some South African producers. Sometimes it can hurt some South African producers. Do we get to fully understand why decisions have been made?
So everything that occurs within the International Trade Administration Commission is really transparent. And they publish a report that gives reasons for their decisions. And if you agree or disagree, at least their position is very clear. And that process is very clear. But once it leaves their desk and goes to the DTIC and from there to the Minister of Finance, everything is absolutely opaque. And we have no idea what happens there. And there would appear to be no legal requirement for any light to be shed on that part of the process, which is obviously problematic because that's where the main decision-making sits.
You talk about the impact that this has, and I mean, delay can really matter. I mean, we've seen very quickly, actually, during the pandemic in the last couple of years, how industries can change. So, I mean, what impact is this having? I mean, there must have been real changes over a 2-year period, real changes over a longer period in an industry. I mean, things are moving very quickly. Look at how coal prices have gone up and down.
Yeah, I mean, we have a large portion of these cases that, for example, were initiated before Russia invaded Ukraine. We have a substantial portion that were initiated before COVID. So if we're looking at an investigation where the facts that need to be considered were facts that were apparent in the market 3 years ago, it's very hard to see how the world is in any way akin to what it looked like in the beginning of 2020.
Donald, do you think people in government are listening? I mean, this is an example, based on what you say, of government departments not really working properly and therefore having an economic impact. Do you think ministers, officials understand the impact all of this is having?
Yeah, so I am actually quite encouraged. I think between the first version of this report a couple of months ago and what we have now, I think there is a real commitment to resolving the backlog. Minister Patel was in Parliament a few weeks ago and actually mentioned that this is a priority to kind of fix this red tape problem. So I'm hoping in 6 months' time, when we publish our updated report, that we'll see things moving in the right direction. But I do believe there's a firm commitment to address this.
Donald Mackay, thank you. CEO at XA Global Trade Advisors. Really appreciate the time.